Hello and welcome. Thunderbunny was an independent, creator-owned series that came and went during the 1980s. It was entirely written by Martin Green and primarily illustrated by Brian Buniak. Despite being published during the black and white boom, the series didn't last long and it didn't connect with a wide audience. That said, it's a testament to the creators' passion for the medium that inspired them. You know what? Let's get right into it. Before creating Thunderbunny, Martin Green had been quite active in the fanzine community. In fact, he produced his own called Comic Crusader. For those unfamiliar with the fanzine, these were usually photocopied comics and articles with tiny print runs that were mailed out to subscribers. Think of it as an underground publishing scene. Beginning in the 60s and well into the 80s, fanzines were the breeding ground for talent looking for exposure. Due to the connections he made, Green assembled a number of independent fanzine creators, and he self-published the collection Comic Crusader Storybook in 1977. It's here that Thunderbunny debuted. Notably, it was drawn by Gene Day and inked by Jerry Ordway, so this character's first appearance had a pretty solid creative team. This 8-page story is Thunderbunny's origin. The young man, Bobby Caswell, sees a falling star that he investigates. What he discovers is a spaceship. Inside is a strange box, inscribed with various symbols, and a depressed portion that resembles a handprint. By accident, Bobby places his hand in this spot, and his mind is filled with images. He sees a being called Dr. Barco, who explains the box contains the power of their greatest superhero. With his world dying, Barco has sent this energy into space so that another advanced civilization can benefit from its use. To activate the power, Bobby needs to fix the image of Thunderbunny in his mind, then clap his hands to transform into a superhero. Barco warns Bobby that the longer he stays in the form of Thunderbunny, the harder it will be for him to change back into his human form. Bobby exits the spaceship, which instantly disappears. He changes into Thunderbunny and then stops a bank robbery. It ends with Bobby wondering if transforming into a rabbit is worth the power he receives. What becomes obvious the further one reads is that Green really likes comics. Not only does the main character, Bobby, collect comics, but his Uncle Al, who we'll meet later, is a comic book artist. Not to mention, throughout the series, there will be many references to comics and comic book characters. Later on, the main cast will visit a comic convention, which is loaded with cameos of industry professionals, many of which I can't identify. So, even if one is unaware of Green's fanzine roots, it's pretty easy to tell he enjoys the medium. Furthermore, Green has a certain level of nostalgia for the Golden Age, which he witnessed when growing up. What is equally obvious is that the original Captain Marvel, nowadays known as Shazam, was a big influence on Thunderbunny. First of all, the story is titled The Sound of Thunder, which alludes to Billy Batson transforming into Captain Marvel. In later stories, Bobby's transformation will be accompanied by the sound effect Fatum, which sounds somewhat like thunder. Also, in that first panel, Bobby is reading WoW Comics, the series where Captain Marvel debuted. I have to point out that the artist, Gene Day, might have misunderstood which Captain Marvel was being referenced, because Bobby doesn't clap his hands to change into Thunderbunny. He hits his wrists together. This is what Rick Jones did to become Captain Marvel in the Marvel Comics series. Of course, within the extended Captain Marvel family, there was Hoppy, the Marvel Bunny. Thunderbunny is like a human-sized, buff version of Hoppy. Design-wise, Thunderbunny has a small cape and booties, like Captain Marvel, and there's a lightning bolt on his chest. To elaborate a little bit more on the costume, we have to go to the character's next few appearances. Thunderbunny's professional debut was 5 years later in Charlton Bullseye number 6. He would appear again in issue number 10. Originally, Thunderbunny's costume was blue. In the next appearance, it became red. Apparently, the change was made because it resembled the costume of Dynamo, a member of the Thunder Agents. This similarity will be addressed a few years later. The first Charlton issue is a short story, retelling the origin with new art and in color. His next appearance, in Bullseye number 10, is an issue entirely dedicated to the character with all new material. There are 2 stories that issue, and the first is a love letter to the Golden Age. It involves the Keeper, a clear allusion to the EC character, the Crypt Keeper, who keeps a number of Golden Age heroes in suspended animation. One such hero, Golden Kid, is released. Naturally, this forgotten hero and Thunderbunny team up to stop a crime. Golden Kid sacrifices himself to prevent Thunderbunny from being harmed. Golden Kid is based on the actual Golden Age superhero, Golden Lad, which is about as close as one can get to copyright infringement without getting sued. Anyway, the story is a homage to all those forgotten heroes. The second story is a trip to a comic convention. Hijinks ensue when a mad scientist unleashes a robot to attack fast food venues. It's a light satire of consumer culture. The mad scientist is named Professor Peony, a comedic portrayal of Richard Peony, the husband and creative partner of Wendy Peony, who produced ElfQuest. Ironically, in a few years' time, the publishing company established by the Peonies will become the home of Thunderbunny. This story introduces Bobby's friend, Gary, who will appear a number of times. It's also the first time the sound effect and the phrase, "effect a change," are used together. Both will become recurring elements. Notably, this is where Greem and the artist, Brian Buniak, begin their collaboration on Thunderbunny. From this point forward, Buniak will illustrate the vast majority of the stories. In 1984, Thunderbunny moved to Red Circle, an imprint of Archie Comics. At the time, Archie was looking to revive its dormant superhero line, and Thunderbunny seemed to fit within that direction. Once again, the issue retells the origin, with an expanded sequence where we see the original Thunderbunny and the reason why he allowed his powers to be drained. This is the one and only time that Bobby has a problem changing back to himself. It's an element that disappears from the comic. The second story takes place at a comic book auction, and we are introduced to Uncle Al. It's a weird story with bad guys dressing up as aliens and trying to rip off valuable comics. Thunderbunny has a short story in this mainstream Archie title. It's the first appearance of the comic shop owner, Gloria, an enigmatic woman whose role is never fully explained. The plot is rather basic. Thunderbunny prevents the robbery of a rare piece of memorabilia. This story, and the previous one, name-checks Don Phelps, the writer of Reading the Funnies. He was, at one time, a popular essayist who covered a number of topics, including comic strips. I can only presume Greem and Phelps knew one another, and they had a shared appreciation of comics and comic criticism. So these appearances are a little nod to his friend. This is another absurd but delightful short story that introduces a recurring bad guy, Simon Sween. Sween intends to raise the price of the original Salvador Dali painting he owns by destroying an exhibit of other Dali paintings. It's a bizarre premise that somehow works. It's also helped by Buniak leaning into drawing with an exaggerated style. It really gives off a Herbie the Fat Fury vibe. After the required misunderstanding between superheroes meeting for the first time, Thunderbunny teams up with the Mighty Crusaders. Together they defeat an alien menace. The issue ends on a mild cliffhanger that was intended to be picked up in an ongoing series published by Archie. The reasons for this not happening are not entirely clear, although one can make a pretty reasonable guess. Archie's attempt to revive their superhero line came to an end a few months later. This left Thunderbunny without a publisher. The new series, published by Warp Graphics, picks up where the Archie issue leaves off. The alien invasion is over, and, after a brief encounter with Gloria, Bobby returns home to some terrible news. His aunt died during the invasion. It's a dramatic story dealing with loss and responsibility. Bobby debates the merits of going to any length to prevent civilian casualties, much like the heroes in the comics he reads. Meanwhile, one lone alien from the invasion is stranded on Earth, and it decides to cause mayhem. Thunderbunny responds, and during the fight, he struggles with destroying this being or upholding a heroic code. He decides to be a hero and not take a life. The remainder of the series never gets that heavy again. For the most part, it's fun adventures with a slight comedic edge. While there will be some inserts of Bobby's life and development, most stories are heavily weighted in favor of Thunderbunny stopping crime and fighting that issue's bad guy. Characters reappear, and villains escape to return another day, giving the series a sense of continuity. Nearly every issue is a classic done in one style, so I'm going to look at a few highlights. Issue 3 is where the mystery of Gloria begins. She's seen reading a book that contains Thunderbunny stories, and she has some weird robot. Her origin, so to speak, is never made clear. Possibly she's like the Watcher, but from the future, who has a catalog of Thunderbunny adventures. That issue has a story about the original Thunderbunny and his home planet. It involves an encounter with the alien race that attacked Earth, which fills out their backstory and motivation. Issue 4 returns to the dangling plot from Charlton Bullseye number 10. Golden Lad, now aged up to his 40s and called Golden Man, returns to team up with Thunderbunny and release the Golden Age heroes imprisoned by the Keeper. Oddly, they fail and barely escape. Despite their best efforts, those forgotten heroes are destined to remain in limbo, which seems like a light commentary on the Golden Age and its place in comic book history. Moonmist debuts in issue 5. This character has a, slightly problematic origin. It was intended to be amusing, but it comes off as a tad creepy through a modern lens. When she's first seen, she's getting undressed and preparing to climb into a suspicious isolation device, which will hold her down and restrict her movement. To enhance the bondage atmosphere, the mad scientist instructs this unnamed teenage girl to call him Daddy. Not Dad or Father, but Daddy. This girl can't help but to note this is not a typical scene. After infusing her with power and giving her a costume, the scientist seems a bit too interested in this young woman who may or may not be his actual daughter. We will discover later that she is, but it reads like she could be some random girl, and this is some strange fantasy being explored. Either way, it feels a touch inappropriate. The costume also enhances her form to make her more shapely. To up the objectification a notch, the scientist never uses her actual name during the entire issue. In fact, we don't learn her name until the very end. Until then, she's just an unnamed, horny teenage girl who clearly has some unresolved issues that'll appear a little later in life. Issue 11 contains an appearance of Dynamo from Wally Wood's Thunder Agents. It's an interesting story, with a sequence that mimics Steve Ditko's style. Then, on the final 2 pages, Grimm addresses the similarities between the two costumes. It's suggested that Wally Wood was inspired by something Grimm wrote and drew prior to Dynamo's creation. It's an odd claim that indirectly accuses Wood of plagiarism. Unfortunately, Wood had passed away before Thunderbunny first appeared in color, so an objection to the costume could not have been made by Wood himself. Ultimately, Grimm seems displeased that someone pointed out the two looked the same. In the process of explaining himself, he made an allegation that cannot be confirmed nor denied. The final issue deserves a special mention because it kind of goes a little crazy. It begins with Gloria reading a future story. The story itself is about a fully grown Bobby and his fiancée, Anne, also known as Moonmist. Both are abducted by Snaka. Snaka strips them down to their underwear, hangs them in a futuristic bondage mechanism, and he demands they give him the Thunderbunny power. I'm not trying to kink shame, but it's worth noting that Anne's first and last appearance involves being bound without consent, followed by a discussion of a power exchange. Make of that what you will. For no discernible reason, Bobby's friend, Gary, is captured by a group of terrorists who want to trade him for weapons. This was a topical subject in the 80s, but it seems out of place in the Thunderbunny universe. Snaka then creeps on Anne, who breaks her bonds and beats the crap out of him. Afterwards, Bobby reveals to Anne he really is Thunderbunny. Then he takes on a horde of terrorists and rescues Gary. The story ends with Bobby and Anne getting married. As if acknowledging the character is done forever, the story ends with Gloria implying the publication of this issue means Thunderbunny will never appear again. He has officially retired from public life. The quote from Washington Irving was intended to imply that Grimm was the historian chronicling the events of Thunderbunny's life. However, it also applies to this video examining the comic itself. The most glorious hero that ever desolated nations might have moldered into oblivion among the rubbish of his monument, did not some historian take him into favor and benevolently transmit his name to posterity. In the end, Thunderbunny is an interesting artifact from a decade when the comic book landscape was changing and maturing. Its roots were the Golden Age, and it tried to uphold the values and energy of an era seemingly forgotten by contemporary times. It contained a level of nostalgia one sees nowadays, within titles such as Local Hero, Blood Squad 7, and Crossover, all of which explore a creative period and then update or transform it with the modern values of those who were influenced. Thunderbunny does something similar. The results are quaint and perhaps a little surface level, but it contains a certain level of charm and enthusiasm, and ultimately, a love of the medium itself. Thank you for watching. Thanks to all my fine supporters on Patreon and YouTube. Your ongoing support makes it possible for this channel to continue. I appreciate every single one of you. Please subscribe if you've not already. Leave a comment and a like. I try to keep ads and self-promotional bits like this to a minimum, so if you can, consider directly supporting this channel on Patreon. Extra special thanks to Spencer Estes, Green Man, Constant Disappointment Records, Jeff Nicholson, Sickin, Francis De La Cruz, Russell Bull, John Nyukes, Andrew Barton, Odin Ashcroft, Ruby St. Dennis, Phil Sagan, Edward Clayton Andrew, Corey Drew, Brian Deaton, Tom Granis, John Gaunt, James Graham, and Matt Marino. You are all justified and ancient. Call me Daddy.